Hey everyone, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you might be. Gonna give a few moments for people to join in. Just wanted to do this live thing because I don't know what I'm doing any more than anybody else does, but I have a short list of things to talk about. Good to see you out there. Um, Thanks for joining in today, and I'm gonna attempt to monitor the chat on my laptop. There's a little bit of a lag between the live video and the chat on my end. But hey, if you got a question, you can type it in there. Um, I am back from a real short little birthday trip to the UK, and I just got to say, um, fly airlines are never fun. But I'll tell you what, on the European airlines, and I flew British Air, and I actually like flying BA. They're a pretty good airline, all things considered. Um, but it doesn't matter what kind of ticket you may have bought, they don't let you choose a seat at all until 24 hours before your flight. Meaning if you're somewhere and you're not able to check in, right at that moment, you're probably getting stuck. And it's bad enough that they would charge, but in some cases it's like 80, $90 for a seat. And this even happened one time several years ago when I was actually fortunate enough to fly in business class overseas. They wouldn't give me a seat assignment unless you paid for it, $95 or more, just to have the privilege of not sitting in a middle seat. So there I'm at. Fortunately, I was in the aisle, but I was in the middle section, and we take off, and everything was actually early. The flight was not full at all, which is weird. Um, to everything these days is a full flight, right? So we're getting ready to leave, and the captain came on, and he said, there's a pretty good chance of aurora tonight. We're flying. You're going to go over Greenland or partly, that way, leaving from Denver, and so he said, we'll keep you posted, but if you're by a window, there's a chance you'll see the aurora tonight. Well, that was cool. And then like not even an hour into the flight, we're somewhere over like South Dakota or something like this, according to the GPS in the seat. Pilot comes back on and just says, "Hey everyone, sorry to interrupt, but the aurora is just amazing, around the plane right now. And so we're going to dim the cabin lights so you can see it. Um, and, feel free. It's not a full flight if you need to move around a little bit." So I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, what can I see? And my people across in the window area didn't seem to really care too much. And we're trying to look out the window. You can sort of see a little glow. And I suggest, if you turn the monitors on your seat back entertainment system off temporarily, if you set that to off, then you might be able to see out the window. And sure enough, you could see this little bit of this glow, but I wasn't going to climb over people. So I went back into the back of the plane, and there's a glass window where the door is, the plane door, at the bulkhead. And the people sitting in the bulkhead didn't seem to care about anything that was going on. And so I looked out this window, and there's the aurora is just insane. It was better than what I saw with my group when I was in Iceland back in September. This had red and green, and it was like Christmas, right? So I put my phone up and I posted it, and I don't always buy the in-flight Wi-Fi, but sometimes you have to post something right in a timely fashion. So I posted this shot literally from my phone. I think it was like one of those 2-second night mode things, and I was lucky that it even focused. When you put your phone up against glass or shooting out a window, the new phones are so good. They have the lidar that can help them focus, but they'll see the window or they'll see dirt on the window and they'll focus on that. Fortunately, this focused on the wing of the plane, which was cool. So I got this shot and I posted it, and I just checked this morning. It's been like over 20,200 times here on Substack, which is just mind blowing because as long as I've been on social media, I've never had any image um, get that much attention or generate that much excitement online. So go figure that it's always an iPhone picture, right? It's always a phone shot that gets the most. You can go through. I swear, I'll go somewhere and I'll be set up for some magical time or whatever, sunrise or sunset, and do all this stuff and get it perfect in post processing. And you post this thing that you spent all this effort doing, and you get 10 likes on a picture, and then you take a picture with your phone, and boom, 20,000 likes later on this aurora picture. So I wasn't planning on posting during my trip, but I went ahead and wrote up a little post on that photo, and I included some tips for iPhone users on not only how to get better shots with your phone with those night mode settings, because you can modify them. It's just you have to be able to find them, and then also some tips on trying to find the aurora, because this is the time of year where at certain latitudes you're going to see northern lights. They say it really runs from most places, it's kind of like October, maybe late September through about March. But from what I've seen, October, November tends to be really good. And whatever was going on, because the next thing I know, right, I'm looking and there's just a flood of aurora photos um, just everywhere. So apparently, the aurora last Tuesday was insane here in North America. It came down even as far down as places. I saw a shot from Monument Valley in Utah, and when you get the aurora coming down as far south as Utah, it's utterly nuts because usually it just doesn't happen. And then you combine that with having clear skies. So I don't think I saw any aurora photos from Florida from this time around, but whatever. It was an insane aurora. So I just want to thank everybody who clicked the little like button on that post, because like I said, I've never gotten, I rarely get more than 50 likes on any photo. I get 20,000 on a freaking aurora picture. That was absolutely nuts. So I'll just leave it at that. But it was cool. So what else is going on? So I'm just getting over my jet lag. It's about a 7-hour time difference between Colorado and the UK. So dealing with that, it's much, much worse coming west, I find. Going over there, you set your alarm for what seems like a normal time, and you feel like you're waking up in the middle of the night, but you get through it and you power through and you're good. Coming home this way, back to the States, you find yourself waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and it isn't particularly it isn't fun. And then just to add just more stupidity to this world, talking about companies will charge for anything if they can get away for it, and it's getting kind of insane. I mentioned the seats with British Air, and so flying home, I had no internet where I was at the time when I was checking in. By the time I checked in, I'm in a middle seat in the, it's just, oh my gosh, 9 hours in a middle seat. I'm still recovering from that. But there's worse things out there in life. At least they fed us, right? But then I get this email from Avis, who I used to rent a car when I was in Florida on that little scouting trip that I ended up cutting short. And it says, here's your toll receipt from Avis. And I'm like, well, okay, because I deliberately did not open the little, toll transponder window that's up in the windshield of the car. So if a lot of places nowadays, the toll roads are monitored by transponders or license plates, and that's fine. It actually speeds things up. I don't have any grievance with that, on face value. But there was this one really small toll that I had to pay. This is in Florida where there's a lot of toll roads, to get from over to the spot where I was not only staying, but where I was going to be where I was scouting over at, this is in the St. Petersburg area. And so it was like $1. I'm like, whatever. I go through the thing. It was a totally automated toll station. I went through the normal license plate tag line. No choice. There's no attendant. There's no credit card machine. Nothing. Right. There's no place to throw coins. And so I get the bill from from Avis the other day for $17 and change, which was absolutely maddening. So it turns out, yes, my tolls were $4. I went through that thing 4 times over the course of a few days, but they have a $6.95 convenience access charge to pass that fee along to me from the license plate of the car, unless you buy their, prepaid toll service, which is a whole different thing. And that's just freaking wrong. And I went and looked, and that's their policy, and there's not much you can do about it, but they charge you $7 almost just to use the license plate toll that you're paying for on top of that. Couldn't believe it. At least I know for next time, but there's no way around that on the toll booths. Fortunately, when I was going through the bridges where it was like $2, $1.75, I could just pay the attendant in cash, and they didn't charge me for those. So that's okay. So that's the airing of the grievances for today. Festivus is coming up, right? But I just wanted to talk a little bit about this topic that comes up all the time, which is AI. And do you use AI in your photography, or what do you do, and what's your thoughts on it? And the 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 thoughts that I see on AI range from, oh, this is the coolest thing ever, to this is the worst thing ever. And so I want to talk a little bit about what elements of AI that I'll use, what I don't use, and what I'm finding. And so what I'm talking about as a photographer are some AI based tools that can improve my image editing. Now I'll talk about the other stuff too. So I'm not going on Chat GPT or uh, Dolly or whatever it was called to generate images or do anything like that. That's just not my thing. But I do see tools that are out there. Sometimes they're in the things I've already owned. Sometimes it's in third party software that I purchase. But there's a lot of AI stuff out there, and it all kind of gets lumped together. So I want to kind of separate this stuff out. So there's a kind of AI that you ask, or you give a prompt to your computer in the system. You go to Chat GPT or whatever, and you say, write me a novel that I can win. No, don't do that. But it's there, and or generate images. And there's a lot of shall we say, potentially ethical issues around that, coming from not just where are they scraping images from to generate these things, but where, the amount of resources, electricity, water required to run these massive server farms that do all the AI. So that's a given, and that's an issue. But that's not what I'm talking about per se with what I'm doing. So there's a couple ways that I will implement AI in a less traditional sense, if you will, in my own photos. And the first one, which is really there's two that are big, but the first one, which is, in my opinion, the real game changer for photographers, is the AI based noise reduction and, to a lesser extent, sharpening tools that are out there. So this is in products like Lightroom denoise, products like Topaz Photo. It used to be called Photo AI. It's now called Topaz Photo. DxO Pure Raw and the DxO Raw tools. They all use various AI based algorithms to analyze the content of your photo, find the subject, find the background, and look for noise, and then zap it. And I'm telling you, this is absolutely a game changer. Anyone who does any kind of action, wildlife, sports, whatever, photography, because there are times when you cannot avoid going into what I call high ISO land, ISO 6400 and above. And people will tell you, well, that's why you need a full frame sensor, or, get less noise. And Yes, those things are all sort of true. But what I find is that now, with the AI tool, whether it's Denoise or Topaz or DxO, I could shoot 12,800, sometimes 25,000 600. And while it's not as good as what you get if you're shooting at your base ISO, it cleans your images up so well that and preserves the detail in ways that you could not do with traditional noise reduction tools. So noise reduction, if we just take a little off ramp here, a little aside, traditionally speaking, in whatever application you use to edit your pictures, it doesn't matter. You've got sharpening and you got noise reduction, and they're fighting each other. Okay, because sharpening is trying to enhance edge detail and enhance, anything that creates edges in your photo. And by edges, I just mean areas of contrast. Okay, a dark and a light. And noise reduction is trying to do the absolute opposite of this. It's trying to blur your image, to smooth out the grain, the noise, whatever. And so the tools for the longest time have been very good at getting rid of color noise to the point where you don't even really think about color noise anymore. But these were like red and blue sprinkles, speckles in the frame, especially with higher ISO images or longer exposures from early cameras, CCD sensors from early to mid 2000s. You could see color noise, and then there's this thing called luminance noise, and that's the grain. Okay. And some people actually like that. They set their cameras to really high ISO so that they get this grain from their digital camera. I'm not that person, but okay, whatever. That's cool. But the trouble with luminance noise, this grain, is that in order to get rid of it, you have to employ some kind of blur into your photo, some kind of blurring. Doesn't matter what it is. And this creates this conflict, this base baseline conflict between preserving detail and getting rid of grain or luminance noise. And there's ways to deal with it. And in the past, I've given entire classes on sharpening and noise reduction, just because learning those tools can be challenging. And the best ways that I was working with it in the past was to do everything with masking, so that I could take the background and the subject and I could apply different amounts of noise reduction to those areas. It turns out that in areas with a lot of detail, your eye doesn't perceive noise nearly as much as it does in a nice background like a sky or out of focus area. Now, these AI tools are just so good. And I should say AI based. They're using algorithms. They're not necessarily going to the cloud and computing your image or doing anything like that. This is just onboard local processing kind of things most of the time. They're so good that applying them almost as, I wouldn't say by default, but I have found that I'm getting better images, even in lower ISO images, by applying an AI denoise algorithm first. If you attended my online class on wildlife photography, wildlife processing using Lightroom, you'll see that I add denoise almost as a given for any shot I'm going to work on. And part of that is because it's not that I was shooting necessarily at a really high ISO, but sometimes the shadows get a little bit dark. And when you raise shadows in post or boost exposure, whatever it might be, the noise is hiding in there. And so there were these limits to how much if you started pulling the shadows too much, you'd start to see noise. And if you run your image through the AI denoise tool first, um, wow, you get essentially you're getting more usable dynamic range. What does that mean then? It means that these ISOs that some people just treat them as being off limits. I know I see wildlife photographers who basically say, yep, I shoot at 1600 and I don't let the camera go any higher than that. To which I say, Okay, but you've made a self-imposed limit. And I suppose if you were not doing any kind of noise reduction at all, you'd be like, "Okay, I get that. That sort of makes sense." Uh, anything, but the noise reduction tools are so good. So 12,000, 800, 25,000, go for it. You're gonna lose some color, but you can bring some of that back. You're gonna lose a little bit of detail, but these tools are so good. So that's one. The other one that I'll use, uh, well, just sort of going with that, sometimes I will take a photo into Topaz Photo to use its AI-based sharpening. This is hit or miss. Unlike the noise reduction, which does a pretty good job, just pretty normal settings. Um, this particular program has about, I don't know, 6 or 8 different sharpening algorithms. And there's times when you choose one and it's just weird. And then there's other times when you have a slightly soft image and it is somehow magical. It just absolutely does things, recovers a little detail in eyes or feathers or whatever in your subject that you just couldn't do with the regular sharpening tools that you might have in your raw processor, whether that's, Lightroom or whatever. So that AI based sharpening is something that it can be quite clever, but it can also screw up your photo. So I take a little bit of care with that one. I will play around with it, see if it works. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Okay. So those are two. Now, then there is this idea of object removal, AI based object removal. Now, cloning and healing brush and these things have been around forever. They've been, well, not, but they've been around for a really long time. And we use them to remove distracting elements. And when done in moderation, it can be quite nice. Um, I had an example of a photo of an osprey. It was on a branch, and hanging from the branch was a lead sinker with some fishing line on it. Now, this is where your photographic philosophy and your intended audience come into play, because I could remove that object as if it was never there, and I could do that using AI based tools or otherwise, and they work great. Or I could leave it there. It depends on your intent. And what I say is, if you're doing photography as a hobby, as an enthusiast, you just want to have nice photos to share with your friends, maybe to print for your decorate or as gifts, then it doesn't really matter that you got rid of this object that was otherwise distracting in your photo, and you happen to use, in this case, an AI-based tool to do it. And there's still the traditional healing and cloning tools, and Photoshop's had those again for over a decade. They've been there for a really long time. Getting rid of dust spots on your photos, that sensor dust. We do this all the time. But there was early on an example that I had of a photo that I took in Ireland, and it was on a trip that I did to Dublin in I think it was 2018. So we're in Dublin, and I'm with my group. We're going down to watch sunset and maybe get a little blue hour. We go down to the waterfront, the riverfront on the River Liffey in Dublin. And the iconic building there is called the Customs House, and it's got a dome. It's very, very pretty. Um, Nice place to take pictures, iconic stuff. Well, there was a lime green motor coach tour bus parked in front of that building, and it just didn't move. And I was doing even long exposures. I was doing stuff where, clouds were moving. I'm getting long exposures. Um, it did not matter because that lime green motor coach was there. And so this was back in 2018. And I tried to get rid of it. I really did. I tried, cloning and, healing brush and what can I do? But the problem was this bus was parked in front of some archways in the building. And so anything I did to clone it out, it wasn't just sitting there in space, which is easy to remove. It had been just a clean background behind it. But because it was in front of this building with the archwork and the stone, it just didn't happen. So when the AI based, the generative fill, whatever you want to call them, tools started showing up in Photoshop a couple of years ago, I took the image back. I went revisited it, and I said, okay, I'm going to lasso this thing, and I'm going to hit the generative fill and see what happens. And oh my goodness, the bus disappeared, and the archways were there. Um, and while it wasn't, reality, um, it was really good, and I couldn't believe it. So there, um, and I'm just thinking, well, if I were a photojournalist and I were documenting, uh, here was the events as they looked at this particular time in front of the customs house in Dublin, I need to leave the motor coach there. But if this is just a picture from your vacation that you want to share, uh, or print, go ahead and take it out. It doesn't matter. So these tools are there, and if you use your discretion in terms of uh, how you employ them, then it's fine. There's one other way that I'll use some of this AI, generative whatever nonsense in Photoshop. And that's a tool called Generative Expand. And I don't use it a lot, but basically, we've all run into the problem where you have a photo of whatever, it could be anything, and it's just not framed right. Like it's cropped in too tight naturally, whether because that's the focal length you were using or you were too close or whatever. The subject's just not aesthetically in the right place. And it turns out if you go into Photoshop, um, and you open up their crop tool. So this normally you think about cropping, you're talking about cropping in, right? You're talking about doing this. But you can take the crop tool, maybe I'll do a video on this at some point, and you can drag the little corners out away from your photo beyond the boundary of the photo. Now, this is something you could do. You could do this before. You didn't need the generative stuff, and I've done things like that, or expanded the frame. It's really easy to do, like a bird on a blue sky. No big deal. You just add a little blue around the edges. Now you've got a little more aesthetically pleasing uh, composition. Life is good. But when you've got rocks and grass or buildings and trees and all these other things, and you're trying to do this, well, that was just a non-starter. So it turns out if you experiment with the generative expand function in Photoshop's crop tool, then sometimes it does some amazing stuff. And again, this is in the context of you're just trying to take your photo, you're not submitting it to the Associated Press as a documentary, as photojournalism. You're just trying to make your photo look nice so that you can share it and print it. So those are the ways that I'll use AI in photography. And then what about the chat GPT stuff? Well, whatever. Um, I look at that as sort of this glorified web search, which isn't a bad thing. It's like as long as you treat it with the idea that it's not always going to be right, but it's a good starting point. So, for example, um, if I am going to a place that I haven't been before, and I ask an AI algorithm to give me the highlights of the places that I should visit, or a little walking tour, even starting and ending uh, of highlights of a town or a city, he does a pretty good job of pulling that up. And yeah, I got to cross reference it, but that's quite handy because I can say, okay, we're going to be walking from this hotel and we want to see the sights in wherever we might be, Barcelona, like I'm going to in March. And it's going to give me a route that is based on distances and time and and say, okay, and this is the best time to be there for whatever, and that can really help as a planning tool. So then that brings me to the other side of the AI thing and the part that drives us all nuts, I think. And that's this generative AI of creating images. And it drives me absolutely nuts because you see these posts and you see someone post a picture and the picture looks too good to be true. So I want to talk about some of these because they're insane. And we are at a point we're at a point where if you know what you're looking for, you can still tell. But man, they're getting really good. I'm not talking about these deep fake videos. I mean, whatever, but it's the same idea. And I'll see these pictures and they are absolutely, it could be a landscape of somewhere, and it could be, usually it's like nature photos of birds. No, little birds do not hide in front of their mother's wings while it's raining and stuff. That doesn't happen. I mean, it isn't. And no, you'll see people post places like, here's lands. I saw someone post Garden of the Gods, Colorado. Well, that's where I live, and I can tell you what it looks like, and it wasn't that, okay? It was just ridiculous. So you start spotting things, and what I spot is a couple of different things I'll use to sort of spot AI stuff. First of all, the subject matter is often too good to be true. So there is that. Which isn't to say that there aren't some photographers actually getting amazing photos. That does happen, okay? Um, but you'll see a lot of times the the tonality and the contrast in these images will be a little bit flat, a little bit painterly looking, okay? Not the kind of contrast you get from natural sunlight. Uh, so that's a tip. And then you'll see other things. So like you know how AI pictures they have problems with fingers. Like it doesn't know how many fingers we have. It's the same thing with birds. Okay. Birds have four toes. Depending on the species, you might get the three in the front and the one in the back. Or if it's like parrot, they'll have two in the front and sort of two in the back. But birds don't have six toes. Okay. So when you zoom in on these images and you start seeing them. But here's the thing that really I find is the most annoying thing. Because I was seeing these back a lot of times on usually it's like Facebook or Instagram, but you see them on all the platforms. And what happens? Somebody posts this too good to be true photo and it farms engagement in a deceitful way. And there's no winning on this because half the comments will be, nature is glorious. Isn't this the best thing you've ever seen? That's an amazing photo. This is tremendous. And the other half were from people like me saying, this is AI, can't you tell? And you know what happens in that scenario is that they've won because they're driving engagement and the algorithm doesn't give a rip whether or not the comments were positive, negative, and this whole like outrage cycle, right? So when things drive outrage online, they get a lot of likes. I'm hoping my Aurora picture wasn't, the likes weren't driven by outrage. It was. I did get someone asked me if it was an AI photo, and I said no. I took it with my phone, and I wrote it up in my article. But those things where people are doing this and getting tremendous amounts of followers or whatever or interaction, it just frustrates me because there's a lot of us out here who go out there, the real way, with a camera and a lens and a tripod, and you spent all this time doing stuff only to have nobody seeming to engage with you. But this whole idea of whether an image is real or not goes back a long way. And one of the things and I'll give a very classic example. I mean, there's compositing, and it's not AI, it's just compositing. Um, if you have a program like Photoshop, it has something called layers, and you can use it to composite and blend images together. It's a great tool, and it's something I do frequently for like adding textures or whatever. But when you see certain photos, uh, they're often a composite. It's not really possible to focus on a full moon at distance and have it be sharp and a skyline unless you're really far away with a telephoto lens. A lot of those moon shots that you see are there are some that are legitimate, but a lot of them will be just composited in. They can do this. I wrote an article once, maybe I should dust it off, about how to add the Death Star to your photos because that's cooler. That's no moon. That's a space station, right? So there was that. Um, but think about sky replacement. There's been this controversy over should you replace skies, and well, I think it depends on the context of what you're doing with the photo. I had a person email me and my former podcast partner about if we were concerned about AI just essentially ruining photography. I'm sure painters thought that photography was going to ruin art, right? Yeah, I don't know what they thought about it, and I think it comes down to a philosophical um, process of how do you derive enjoyment from whatever your particular outlet is, whether it's photography or anything else. If there are people, and it's whatever, everybody's different. If you view photography as a means to an end, where the end product and generating likes, interaction, uh, awards from your camera club or winning a contest, and that's your end goal, I can see being frustrated by this. And I'm reminded of a time where I was doing a workshop, and it was in White Sands, New Mexico. Really fun place to visit. It's logistically a little bit tricky, and we went there for multiple days, and the scenery in White Sands doesn't change all that much. I mean, you've got gypsum dunes and yucca. The idea is you're going there and you're going to find, this holy grail of a yucca on the dunes with no footprints around it. Good luck with that. And you're going to have this amazing clouds in the sky. And so uh, you just don't ever know what you're going to get when it comes to weather, right? It just happens to be whatever it is. So we're there, and like the first day or two, there was just no clouds at all, just no clouds whatsoever. And one of my clients was getting a little frustrated by this, and he said something that I just, I you do you, okay? But my client said something along the lines of, "I came here to get pictures to win, to impress my camera club, basically. And I'm gonna have to do sky replacement on these because there's no clouds." I had to think about that one for a minute. I need to win a contest. Nature isn't giving me what I want in reality. Therefore, I'm going to have to contrive an image of composites. Um, you know, and again, this was before there was AI, anything really. So we weren't talking about that. And it got me thinking, I'm like, well, if that's how you get your enjoyment of this, okay. But when someone asked me if I felt like I'm, you know, going to be out of business, if you will, or will I lose my enjoyment of photography because there's AI generated things? I really said no, because it's It's the being there that means something, whether I get a good photo or not. I mean, I want to get a good photo. I want to have amazing skies. I want to have all that. And sometimes you got to be in a place for a couple of days to get that. You can't always do that. But it really comes down to how you derive enjoyment or satisfaction from this I don't want to say hobby, but this activity. Um, and so, I will continue to do that, and I will hope that someday I get that, amazing photo. That's just it's kind of like the Holy Grail thing, right? Maybe you'll find it, maybe you won't. Maybe I'll get 1,000 likes on something. Maybe I'll get 10, but I was there, and I got to be there. I got to watch this bird or whatever this be out in nature, and that to me means almost as much as getting the photos themselves, because I know that I don't always get the best photo. I'm not always in the right place at the right time. The light, it's going to be whatever it's going to be. And then there's the times when you just got to use whatever you got to use. You grab your phone and take a shot, and it's really, really good. So it's just, I don't know. That was on my mind today. I was just kind of going through these things. I was trying to get some workshops set up for next year, and I was thinking to myself, and I said, I'm an extrovert, but photography, you can be in a group of photographers and be a total introvert. It's kind of funny how that works, because it's just like everyone's doing their own thing, even though there are a bunch of people around you. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. It's pretty wild. It's like peopling for introverts. Just do photography, set up a tripod at sunrise. No one's really talking to each other, and you're just focusing on your camera, and then you can go back and hide away and work on your photos on the computer and share them later. But I just want to thank everybody out there today. Dr. UV, Lee, Cam, Matt Knott, hey Lefty, Craig, Marco, Nuno, Ira, hey Lotta, Carol. Good to see everybody. Thanks for being here. Like I said, I'm just kind of riffing these sideways, but I appreciate your subscribing. Before we go, if you like this or whatever, smash the heart button for me to get a couple of likes. Maybe that will help the algorithm, right? That's all I can say about this. But there will be I'll post this later with a replay. Substack being Substack. Enjoy the day. Who knows what else is going to happen today, right? It's going to be a fun news day today. I just thought I would talk a little bit about something other than what's coming out of Congress these days. So enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. I'm Jason Odell. My Substack is The Photographer's Perspective. Thanks again for joining me today, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.